Hello and welcome to Unfiltered Eat Better, Think Better series. This is where we get real about our emotions, mindset, connection to food, and healing, and what it really takes to break free and feel good in your body and life again. I'm your host, Janie Shah, and in this series, I sit down with everyday people who face challenges with their health, body, their mind, their confidence, or long held beliefs that have held them back, and found powerful ways to rise and grow through it all. These are real stories, no filters, no fluff, just raw conversations about what they struggled with, what actually helped, and how they created transformation from the inside out. Whether you are on your own journey or just curious on what's possible, you are in the right place. Here's to eating better, thinking better, and living a phenomenal life. Let's go. So today I have a really special guest who I met at a co-working session and I'm very, very grateful for. Today we're going to be talking a little bit about burnout. Burnout, I feel, has become almost a badge of honor in our culture. It's like something that we're celebrated for, that, oh, you did this. But, behind the long hours, the constant availability, and just that striving for approval, it often hides something much, much deeper. And today I'm sitting down with Rehema, whose story is one that I know so many of us will relate to. It's tying our identity and our sense of worth to our work. It's perhaps ignoring the warning signs as well, and then hitting that wall of burnout. And what's incredible about Rahema's journey isn't just how she came through it, but I feel the wisdom that she carries now about redefining this idea of success, of really tapping into and understanding her own values, and starting to learn to design life and work with intention. So, Rehema, thank you so much for being here with us. And how about we just start at the beginning? When was it that you first started noticing signs that something wasn't right? Where were you? What were you doing? Yeah, what was going on?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you, Janie, for inviting me to have this chat with you. This is really cool, very special. Um, I speak to people every once in a while about my burnout experience, but always from a place of, a bit of trepidation, just because of the context of how I experienced it. I'm excited to talk about it in a bit more detail today. And essentially, for me, I think context is important, right? So I started off my career in marketing and then switched over into software engineering. And that switch happened in 2016. It was a career change. But essentially, what happened was I went from a very high intensity, fast paced work environment to another high intensity, fast paced work environment with no break in between. Um, but I was so excited to switch into this new career, into this new job. Um, but I think something that might be helpful for people is to understand how our thinking and our belief systems can affect the way that we experience the things that everybody experiences, like stress, right? So when I made my transition into tech, I didn't have a technical background. I did not study computer science or anything like that, but I was just very passionate and very excited to try something new and very motivated. Um, and so when I joined this new company, they did like a whole training program for new joiners, and then you would get placed with their clients as part of the program that they had set up. And essentially, I felt like I was really lucky to have gotten in, and that I had to prove myself constantly that I was like the right choice, that they made the right choice on me, that I wasn't a failure. So we're placed in different cohorts. And, there were different people in my cohort. Some of them had computer science degrees, some of them had experience working in the field as software engineers, and I had none of that. So I was, super determined to make sure that I wouldn't get left behind, that I would graduate, quote unquote, with my cohort. And I was able to do that. But essentially, I think partly that set me up um, to be in this mindset of needing to constantly feel like I was proving myself at work.
Mm.
And I don't blame the company for this. This was, you know, a part of my worldview that was not helpful or healthy to me. But I didn't recognize it at the time, right? I always thought that when you start working, like that is super important. Your career comes first, and you need to put your all into it. And it is only if you're able to build out your career and, sort of define yourself by some title or some position or some profession, then the rest of your life will work out. Everything else will fall into
Yeah.
relationships, friendships, life experiences, all of those big milestones of, getting your first place, getting your first car, all of those things seem to me to be pegged on, first of all, having a stable career, right? Um, so that's what I did. I just like fully threw myself into it, 200%.
Can we
Um,
just can we tap into
mhm,
that a little bit? Because I think that's a really important point that
mm,
so many of us, and I feel like I had this as well when I was a lawyer and I was practicing and I was, climbing the ladder. It was
mm,
this tying this idea of success to this role and this part that I play. And then when I do well, I prove myself and then I keep climbing and then that's where success happens. And I'm
yeah.
curious for you, this idea of, or this belief that you had at the time of proving yourself and, having to do well. Where do you think that belief came from?
Oh, I think that was one of those like core beliefs from childhood, you know? Um, I think there were certain elements of the structure of my upbringing. I think that also impacted that, where I was raised by a single parent, but also would visit with my dad and his family very often. So I was always sort of living in between two worlds, growing up and shuttling between two households. And I think there was an element there where I felt like, again, in order to continue to be valid or relevant or seen, I needed to be doing things, right? That other people deemed to be valuable or interesting or cool. So much of like, and I think many children, many parent this way, this idea of, you tell your child to motivate them, or if you do really well with at school, if you get these grades, then I will buy you this gift, right? If you do really well with this, then you get this, right? So very early on, that idea of you only get to have a good thing if you deserve it. You only get joy, happiness, fun experiences if you've worked hard in order to deserve the benefit, the gain, the present, the gift, right? And I don't think that that necessarily is a bad thing, right? I'm not a parent, so I can't speak to parenting strategies, and I wouldn't want to. But I do think that was sort of a pretty foundational belief system that I had, and sometimes that I still struggle with today, right? I don't really deserve to take a break because I haven't earned it yet, right? Is a conversation that I'm constantly having in my own mind. So yeah, it became the same thing with work, really. It was this thing of I need to just go all in. And only if I've worked very, very hard, not necessarily very, very smart, but just if I've worked very, very hard, then I will deserve the good things that come with that. But I never really sat down and gave myself or tried to imagine like a clear idea of even what that should be. So like I had a lot of ambition, but no vision of where I actually wanted to go or what kind of life I wanted to live, or even what kind of work really that I would love to do. I had a general idea that I really enjoyed software engineering. I love this idea of getting to create things. I never thought of myself as particularly creative. Um, Ironically, not particularly creative in terms of being able to make things, and also not particularly logical in my thinking. So software engineering really came as a left field discovery for me of like, wait, I actually really enjoy this. And for me, a big part of it was just, yeah, that feeling of creativity. I can have a thought and I can produce it, and it's a thing that I can interact with, and other people in the world can interact with, whether it's a website or app or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, that was
Yeah, I
basically
think, I
it.
mean, that's a huge point is that, all our childhood experiences create these beliefs in us. And that's something
Yeah.
that we dive into in rapid transformational therapy. And it's not to discredit our parents and not to say that they did it wrong or whatever, they did the absolute best they could with the information they knew how. But it is these belief systems that we form. And I have this one as well that I'm tackling at the moment that taking a break or just having a bit of a rest is lazy. And if you're lazy, you're not productive. If you're not productive, then what are you?
Yeah,
And
exactly.
so
What's your point in existing?
what's your point? And it's a
Yeah.
big thing in Indian culture as well, right? Like in Indian culture, it's
Mm,
like go, 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 work, work, work. But I think there's a way we can start to redefine what success is and what beliefs drive our actions. Because in this particular instant, that belief really did lead you to a point where you weren't able to operate as well as you wanted to, and you weren't feeling that joy. Like you mentioned just now, you actually had this joy and happiness from this new skill that you've learned, and you were actually
Yeah.
enjoying on that technical creative side of things. And yet now this push to prove yourself and that belief that was driving you to work hard, hard, hard led to something that wasn't so comfortable. And I'm wondering if you could share with us a little bit now on what were some of the signals that you felt that made you realize, whoa, I can't keep going like this.
Yeah, it took so long for me to actually pay attention to those signals. Around 2019, I think is when it really started for me. And a lot of it is, again, seems very ordinary in terms of, what people talk about in terms of work culture or adulting, right? I just feel constantly kind of tired all the time. Rarely took my vacation days, rarely went on holiday, but even when I would go on brief holidays to visit family, I'd come back and I still don't feel very rested. I started to feel this sort of low level sense of persistent anxiety, just a general sense of something isn't quite right. But I'm like, that's not important. The job is more important. Like, let's focus on work. Let's, tough it out mentality. Like, just get it going. Um, then I started to have lots of like small, 5-day colds, when you're in the office and you're constantly sneezing or you have a bit of a cough or you just wake up and you feel that general sense of malaise. That was just a constant for me. Um, but again, I wasn't really paying that much attention. I was like, I just need to toughen up, or like, I just need to sleep better. It'll be fine. But really, my body was giving me warning signals from a very early point that things were not okay. And then another thing that I was doing that was super unhealthy was that, again, my entire focus was on work, which means that I didn't give myself or allow myself to develop other interests or hobbies or activities outside of the work that I was doing. And I happened to work basically US time zones. So my entire day was shifted to essentially evening and working through the night. So my sleep schedule was off, working really long hours, enjoying it. I was actively enjoying it, but it was tearing away at me in ways that I didn't quite understand until around mid 2019. I had a work trip coming up and I realized, I don't know how it came to be, but I just had this thought in my mind of there's no way I can get on this plane for this work trip. I started to realize that I was feeling actual terror at the idea of like going on this work trip. And I think
Wow.
I started to realize, well, like, that's not normal. This is not a normal reaction. And this was not the first work trip I've been on, right? But because the feeling was so strong, it had gone from that low level feeling of anxiety to like an active feeling of panic. It's like, oh, something's off here. So it's only when, now I was sort of being shaken to like wake up to the fact that I wasn't well, is when I started to try and figure out, okay, how can I start to address this? So I guess as an aside, one of the things that also complicated my burnout experience was the fact that I also happened to have an anxiety disorder and a depressive disorder. The depressive disorder has existed for a long time and was well managed at this point, but the anxiety disorder was new to me. And this was the beginning of that feeling of like actual fear, active fear. So because I have this history with mental health challenges, I knew that I needed to see a therapist. And so that was my first plan of action. So fortunately for me, I had a fairly low barrier in that sense. I know for a lot of other people, that is actually a very high barrier. They may feel or have stigma attached to the idea of seeing therapists. But fortunately for me, that wasn't an issue. It was more just, I need help. This is where I need to go to get that help. My stigmas or perhaps challenges were actually around talking to my family and friends about what I was experiencing. For me, it was easier to talk to a stranger
Yeah, I
about
think
what I
it's
was
quite often
feeling.
the case. It's quite often the case
Yeah,
it's easier to speak to a stranger
yeah,
than to the people closest to you, which is hopefully
yeah,
something that these kinds of conversations that we have can break
yeah,
that up a little bit and make it easier to speak to those who are close to you as well.
as
Um,
well. Yeah, yeah.
Out of
Because I was
curiosity,
able to
do
open
you
talk to them later, but not at the start. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm.
Out of curiosity, do you think maybe, or now maybe in hindsight, think that the burnout exaggerated the anxiety? If you've never felt that way about a trip or flying, and then now all of a sudden that one trip really brought out the fear in you? I don't know.
Yeah.
What do you think? Is it possible?
I think the burnout reduces your self-defense, your capability to defend yourself against, what would be normal stresses and, normal triggers in life. Um, for me, they sort of happen to come about around the same time, but if the burnout hadn't already started, I think my ability to even notice that something was going wrong would have happened sooner, right? But with burnout, you're just so constantly kind of just exhausted and you constantly feel unwell that feeling a little bit worse doesn't, like, I didn't notice, right? Because I was already at this level
Yeah.
below what my normal levels should be. So when the anxiety kicked in, that was more of a signal of like, oh, something is wrong. But I was able to recognize that actually I haven't been feeling good for a while at this point.
Yeah.
But they definitely worked together to exacerbate each other. And I think part of the reason why my burnout ended up lasting so long is because of that combination of factors that came about together. But actually, since then I've read articles and documents that have said that, for many people, burnout is not a 1 week thing. It's not a 1 month thing. It might not even be a 6 month thing. There are more and more people who are experiencing multi-year burnouts, and that was my experience. Unfortunately, it did last for me for about 3.5, almost 4 years. The anxiety episode lasted less than a year, right? So the burnout actually outlived the more serious, what would be considered a more
Okay.
serious mental health challenge. Yeah.
Yeah.
And a big part of that, I think, is because things like anxiety and depression are very well studied, right? And you can go to a therapist, you can go to a psychiatrist, there's medication that you can take. And mine did get to the point where it was affecting my life so severely that I did have to go on medication for about a year, actually. And I continued to work throughout this time, which, when I think about it now, is a little bit insane. Um, but again, that whole mentality of like, what I can't stop, right? I can't quit. Like, also, I have no right to be falling apart. I have all of the benefit, all of the, yeah, like my life is what so many other people would hope to have, right? In terms of my access to information, my access to resources, in terms of the exposure I've had, the good education, good grades, right? Like, I am not the profile of a person who should be struggling at a point where I should actually be taking off in my career. Because at this point, I'd now been a software engineer for a couple of years, I should be moving into more senior positions. I should be getting promotions. All of the things on the ladder that you're supposed to just be like climbing and easily ticking off. I was like, I'm in that position. This should be working. I have no right to be falling apart over nothing, right? Or what felt like nothing.
Yeah, I think
And
that
it's,
just gave me
yeah,
chills right now when you said that, like, who am I to break down? And it
yeah,
just shows like how strong that sort of belief and idea of how we're supposed to be can
mm,
overrun even your body trying to tell you, please just slow down, take a step back, and give me a pause. That
yeah,
literally just gave me chills because that's how much so many of us operate. Like that's how we operate, and then we don't listen to
exactly.
these signals. Um, oh wow.
Yeah.
How would you define burnout for you?
I would define it as mental and physical symptoms that impact your life and your ability to lead whatever you would determine to be a regular life caused by a variety of things. And it's not hard work that is a cause of burnout. There's nothing wrong with hard work.
Yeah.
What causes burnout, I think, more often than not, is a combination of intense work combined with a loss of meaning or a loss of purpose in whatever that work that you're doing is. I think that is the key combination. It's not just that you have a busy schedule or you're busy juggling lots of different intense responsibilities. It's not that. I think it's the combination of that intensity plus this feeling of what am I actually working towards? Like, what is this all for, even? All this
Yeah.
time that I've spent, was it a waste? Because what am I trying to even achieve? Um, I didn't have, again, as I said before, I had lots of ambition, but no vision. So
Yeah.
I just kept assuming that my managers would be the ones who would know where best to place me. Like I distinctly remember I had one really good manager who would ask me, she's like, Rehema, what do you want to do? I can see that you're capable, you could do this. Do you want to take on more leadership within your team? Do you want to lead this project, or like what do you want to do? And I couldn't tell her. I had no idea. In my mind, I was like, wait, I'm not really qualified to like take on more. Like it's okay, just leave me here to like keep, plugging away at my tasks, but also assuming that that would get me um promotions. It doesn't. you know.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I had no sense of who I wanted to be or what I wanted to achieve. And so I was just working very hard every single day. And all that means is that you're just working very hard every single day. Like it's like you're pushing the rock up the hill and rolling it back down every single day just to get up and push it back up the hill. I had no sense of what I was doing it all for. And then to make matters worse, because again, for many people, work is important, right? You for some people they view their job as the thing that helps them pay the bills so that they can like live their life. But I didn't even have that aspect, right? I wasn't really like putting a lot of focus or energy into my social life or my creative life or my personal life. So yeah, I think that was a core part of it for me. It was just that lack of meaning in what I was doing, but still
Yeah.
doing it at 120% anyway.
Anyway, right. Yeah. And I think so then was this the point where you had to actually look down at what is my meaning or what's my purpose or what am I even doing here? Is this what pushed you to look into that?
Yeah, there was a moment. So 2020 rolls around, and obviously the pandemic comes. And at this point, I was thinking that the main thing that I was struggling with was my new anxiety disorder, right? And that's what I was trying to manage. But around the same time, I also managed to pick up what I didn't know at the time, but a stomach infection. So now I'm dealing with multiple health issues at the same time, but all of them vague and, sort of hard to pin down, and just that constant exhaustion. But I think the moment when I started to realize that actually what was happening to me was burnout was when I got to a point where I would open my laptop and again, the anxiety would kick in immediately. I got to a point where I would like be trying to read an email, not even lines of code. I was just trying to read emails and I couldn't understand the words. So I'd have to read it again. And I'm like, wait, I don't understand. And then I'd read it again. Uh, so tasks that would normally take 2 minutes, 5 minutes, were now taking me 30 minutes, an hour. When it came to my actual coding tasks, those were now taking 2 to 3 hours, when before it would have been like a 30-minute task. My productivity just like fell off a cliff. And it
Yeah.
felt like it happened very dramatically, very suddenly. But I think I'd been building up to it, right? But it just reached a point where literally my brain stopped working. Like my
Yeah.
capacity, my ability to work was literally like fading. Just a very, very intense brain fog. I was having trouble making decisions, even simple decisions about like, what am I going to make for breakfast? Or like, oh, should I prioritize this task or that task? Those functional cognitive abilities were like disappearing. And that terrified me. And so now as I was doing my research, I was like, oh, people are talking about burnout. Like actually, I found myself ticking off a whole bunch of the like, the
Yeah.
signals that this could be burnout. But I still didn't, I think I was too scared to really take the time to sit with it and think, what could this be? I was like, all right, let me work on my medications, let me work on the anxiety, because at that time the anxiety was actually worse. Or not worse, but it was more alarming to me, because it was affecting things like, I was scared to like get in my car, I was scared to drive, I was scared of everything basically. So I was like, it was the pandemic, there was lockdown, so we were all being told to stay inside. So I was able to mask it because I was like, yeah, we've been told by the government to stay indoors, but really, even if we hadn't, I would not have left my house,
Wow.
unless I absolutely had to. Yeah, I was sort of dealing with all of those things, but I still stayed in my job for a year while dealing with chronic stomach infection, digestive issues, doing endoscopies, seeing therapists and psychiatrists, being on medication, and on top of that, the brain fog that came about because of the burnout. And it's really when I hit my breaking point, again, wasn't even from an internal reflection of like, I can't sustain this. It was from a fear that my employer would fire me. So I was still putting all of my self-worth and my sense of like, what do I get to do for myself based on other people's needs and desires above my own, right? So that was a moment where I was like, oh my goodness, I feel like I'm doing so poorly at work that they're going to fire me and then it's going to look terrible on my record and I won't be placed on another client. And that was the thing that made me realize, and it came into my mind one day, just like someone whispered it into my ear. I was staring at my laptop again, unable to do my work. And I was like, I need to take a break. Why
Mm.
don't I take a sabbatical? You know? And it's kind of funny now when I think about it, because really I just needed to quit my job. But using the word sabbatical made it feel like it was not just me giving up. It made it feel like it wasn't failure, which is
Yeah.
what quitting in my mind felt like. I'd never just like quit like that. You know, I'd always been a high performer. And so this idea of being a low performer was just like, really messing with my sense of self. So I was like, okay, let's call it a sabbatical. It was a medical sabbatical. And I'm really grateful to the HR person that I spoke to at the time who heard, but I also think because many people were going through this around the same time, right? COVID was very challenging for very many people. So I don't think I was the first person who approached them and said, I think I might need to take a break, but I was also worried because I needed the health insurance because I was still on all of my medications to treat my stomach issues, my brain issues. So they gave me 3 months where I'd officially be still employed. I just wouldn't be paid in full, but it would allow me to continue to hold on to my health insurance, which I'm so grateful for. So yeah, we did that process. And it was so funny, like I think day 1 or 2 of sabbatical, where I just felt ironically more anxious, like not relieved.
Wow.
I was just sort of
Interesting.
like, what do I do? What am I supposed to do? What is a person supposed to do? What does it mean to like human?
Yeah.
You know? Um, and the sabbatical, I think, did save my life. Like that, in addition to, the treatments that I received, it was so necessary. It would have been absolutely impossible for me to keep working through that experience, given
Yeah.
where my brain and my physical health was. At some point, actually, Janie, had been about like 58 kgs, and I went all the way down to about 42 kgs in a period of about
Wow.
6 months. Like my body was physically struggling. I felt like I was at war with my brain. I was at war with my body. Like nothing was working.
Yeah.
So, partly it was in my brain, it was in my head, but also like there were physical ramifications that I was experiencing. And taking the sabbatical allowed me a moment to breathe. Um,
Mhm.
I think of the medication I got from my psychiatrist in the same way. It allowed me to go from this, being up here or in terms of anxiety and stress and just like again feeling like I was at war with my body. If this was the baseline, I was here.
Yeah.
And taking the medication and also going on sabbatical allowed me to come back closer to a neutral place. And it's only when I got to this place of like more neutral, more stable, is when I could now start to think, what am I experiencing? What does this mean for me? And like, what do I want to do next? There was no way for me to have those kinds of thoughts when I was in panic mode.
Of course, yeah, because you don't have that space or mental
You have no
capacity
space.
and think. Um,
Absolutely, absolutely. It's like you're in fight or flight constantly. And
yeah.
so all of those two things combined, the medication and the time off, just allowed me to bring my baseline levels down to something close to normal, where now I'm like, okay, we can breathe a little bit. Now we can actually think. But it was also a little bit scary because now that you have that space to think, the thoughts are difficult ones, right? The thoughts are,
Yeah,
is
they're
this
the scary
failure?
ones.
Yeah, exactly.
How did you move from day one and day two of sabbatical where you're thinking like, oh my gosh, what do I do? What do I actually do with my time?
Yeah.
To actually going to a place where you could be open and curious and comfortable at addressing the big questions that might come up. And how did you use that space? And what
Mm.
tools helped
I
you?
I knew that I needed to provide myself with some kind of structure for that period because, I've come to learn that there's two, maybe more, but I tend to think of it as two different types of rest. You have active rest, right? Like maybe when you go on a road trip or something like that, where you're like filling your cup, right, with things that are new and interesting and that give you joy. That's one way to replenish your energy. And then there is the type of rest where you really do just need to switch off, stay inside, watch movies, whatever calm, peace, silence looks like for you, right?
Yeah.
So I wanted to give myself part of that structure. But again, this was like 2021, so COVID restrictions still everywhere. I was worried about my ability to sustain myself off of my savings during the sabbatical period. So I decided to just focus in on one or two activities. And the thing I picked at the time, I think based off of watching YouTube videos, was ceramics and pottery.
Okay.
So I found a pottery studio near my house, and then I would just go there once or twice a week. And interestingly enough, I think that activity of hyper focusing on one thing, because I didn't know how to do pottery, this was my first time, and it's very physical. I had gone from several years, a decade really at this point, of just like purely working online, working on my computer, mostly working remote, to this in-person experience where I was actively feeling and touching this clay and trying to mold it and trying to shape it. And the fact that after every class, I had, a small thing that I could look at and be like, oh, I made that, right? Whether it was good or not, whether it was broken or not, didn't really matter. What I found was that it almost felt like meditation to focus in on one task, one tangible task using my hands. And I think for different people, this was going to look different, right? So for some people, it might be traditional meditation. For some people, it might be prayer. For some people, it might be going on runs, right? I've heard runners say that running feels like meditation to them, working out. Um, I used to go walk in Karura and Arboretum. Really, I found just giving myself giving myself some sort of structure, but in those structured activities, I was doing things that made me or that helped me focus in on the moment was super helpful in, yeah, giving my mind some space to then start being able to think a bit more clearly.
Yeah.
But again, I had those 3 months and I got to the end of the 3 months and I realized I still wasn't ready to go back to work. I still didn't feel like I was 100% okay. At this point, I still thought burnout was a couple months and I'd be fine. So I went back to my employer and I said, yeah, I'm still not ready. But the terms of our agreement was that I would get 3 months. And then if I wasn't ready after the 3 months, then, we'd just terminate and go our separate ways. Um, and so that's what I did. Now I was like fully unemployed. Before I had the title of like, oh, I'm on a
Yeah.
sabbatical. That makes it sound like I'm not just like messing with my life, just taking fun for fun's sake. I was like, well, now I'm just unemployed. But again, I really had to go inward. So I did a lot of journaling. I was reading. I was, watching YouTubers who had gone through similar things or listening to podcasts of people who've gone through um, those sorts of similar things. And that helped me feel, first of all, that I wasn't alone in this experience. This is not a unique failure on my part. Coming to the acceptance again through continued therapy sessions that, you know, again, that whole thing of you don't deserve to take this break, you don't deserve to be falling apart, because in all other areas of life, you're very privileged. I just started to just accept that, yes, that is true. I am very privileged. And I am also very unwell. And those two things can both exist at the same time. And it is my responsibility to take care of myself, right? Nobody else is coming to save me. I'm an adult. So if I want to feel better, if I want to lead a life that feels better, if I want to try and make sure that I never end up in this place again, I have to take responsibility for the tools and resources and effort that I'm going to need to put in order to make myself help myself feel better.
Yeah.
And that was kind of the beginning of, yeah, what has been now a long journey into,
Yeah.
yeah, trying to build a life that allows me to support myself in the ways that I need.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm really loving from what you're sharing right now is that through the efforts that you took, right, in one, accepting help and asking for help, finding that therapist to work with, being on medications when you needed to be on medications, and then so importantly, what you just said was taking responsibility. And one of my favorite quotes of all times is from a man called Hal Elrod, and he says, "The moment you accept responsibility for everything in your life is the moment you gain the power to change anything in your life."
Mm.
And that's exactly what you've, shown here is that you took responsibility and said, "Hey, no one's coming to rescue me. I've got this. I'm going to take responsibility for things that have happened." And therefore, you're also taking responsibility for the actions and moving forward and how you can totally turn your life around. And I think that's wonderful. And I really want to highlight the courage it took you to say that after 3 months, I'm not ready yet. I'm not ready yet to go back
Mm.
into the workforce. That takes huge courage, and I really want to applaud you for that. And I hope
Thank
everyone that's
you.
listening can see that as an example that sometimes it's okay. You don't have to rush back. If you have the means and the ability, then give yourself that little bit of extra time to, yeah, to do what you need to do and take responsibility. You watched YouTube videos, you watch podcasts, you got different
Mm.
ideas of what it can mean to support yourself, and then you focused on one thing and the other. um as there's so much we could dive into here, and I'm like, this happens every time, and I'm sure we're gonna have, there's so much more we could unpack here. But one thing I'd
Mm.
really love for you, if you could share, when you think about success now, what's different in how you define it compared to back then?
That's a great question. The life is so non-linear, and I think that's one of the things, right? It's just coming to that acceptance of, uh, again, I'm off the ladder. The ladder doesn't exist.
Yeah.
I have to sort of create. Now I'm actively trying to create these visions and ideas of what it is I want to achieve and the kind of life I want to live. And I think that for me is success. It's not so much that there will be some specific outcome where I'm like, "Ooh, yeah, I went for that and it made it," and praise and glory and it's all worked out. Like for me, success right now is more about continued intentionality, and continued experimentation. Um, I think I mentioned at the beginning, that I didn't think of myself as being a particularly creative person, even though that's something I'd always wanted to like get closer to. And even during my sabbatical, one of the things that helped me feel better was doing a creative act, right? Was doing pottery. Um, I also started trying to learn how to play a guitar, right? Like these are things that I'd always wanted to do, and now I had a bit of space and time to do it. At the end of my extended sabbatical, I was able to go back to work, and I, you know, was able to get hired, and I was so excited because it felt like we're done with all the bad stuff. We've thought about it, we've journaled through it, we've walked through all of our Buritam and career for it. Like we're good now, right? I don't have to deal with this stuff ever again. I was off the medication. I was good. Therapists had given me all the tools I needed. I was like, I'm solid. And I started this job, and about 4 months in, the brain fog started to return. And I was like, oh, wait, there's
Yeah.
more work that we need to do here. And I think, again, it came back to that same sense of, when you've been working a certain way or operating under certain beliefs for so long, even though I had this experience that like really did fundamentally shake me, going back to work put me in exactly the same mindset that I'd been in before. Even though now I was like, okay, now I have more tools and I'll be more careful and take better care of myself. I'm trying not to overwork and make sure I'm like feeding my hobbies. But when it actually came to the day to day, oh, I found I was precisely the same spot that I had been in before from like a mental
Yeah.
perspective. Um, and anyway, ended up being retrenched from that job. They actually let go of the entire engineering team. This was just before the tech industry in general sort of imploded on itself a couple months later. So it's sort of funny that these things happened kind of at the same time. But because of that, actually, I think it helped push me further into thinking more about like, okay, um, career instability is now just going to be a default because the industry that I'm in and the profession that I'm in is fundamentally changing, like let alone my personal crises. The
Yeah.
industry itself is fundamentally shifting. And this was just before the AI revolution. And then now there's all the talk about AI and how like, do software engineers even have jobs anymore and all of this stuff. So because of that, now it wasn't just an internal existential crisis, there was an external one happening as well. Those two forces are actually what made me think, okay, I really should probably try and figure out what I want to do aside from just like, oh yeah, I'll go back to work and then also make more time for hobbies on the weekend. Like that still wasn't like a vision of life, right? That was
Mhm.
still going to lead me to burnout eventually. So I actually started working with a coach who helped me figure out my values and my value system as it related to my job and my work. And that experience was also super helpful. So in my mind, I see therapists and psychiatrists for me are people that I reach out to when I'm in mental crisis.
Mhm.
And I know that because of my particular chemical imbalances that may be happening in my brain, like those are things that may come again, right? These are sort of long-term chronic conditions. Right now, I'm perfectly healthy, no medication, doing perfectly fine. But I know from past experience that they can come again. Separate from that, though, is now what does life look like when you are healthy, right? What are your goals and your visions and the things that you're trying to achieve when you are in a good space and mindset? And how can you or how can I try to strengthen that so that, when the heavier stuff comes, I have built up better defenses. So even though it might take me down for a little bit, it won't knock me out, hopefully, as badly as it did before. So working with that life coach, Coach Faith, was super helpful for me because I was now able to look at things from the perspective of like, all right, so we've gone through this experience. We now have a really good idea of what we don't want our lives
Yeah.
to look like. So how do we now come up with a new vision of what we do want life to look like, right? Because it can't all be that you're running away from something negative. I have to be working, at least for me, I need to be working towards something positive.
Yeah.
So that really helped me clarify in my own mind the place of creativity for me, the place of what fulfillment and meaning looks like for me. Now that my sense of identity being tied to work has been broken, what do I fill that space with, right? And yeah, as part of that process was figuring out what does success look like then in that case.
Yeah.
And I think for me, it really is now more about whereas before, if you had asked me that question, pre-burnout 5 years ago, I would have said, oh, I'm at this level at work and I'm doing this and I've got these career opportunities. That's probably what a lot of my response would have been around. Now it's a lot more about like, does my life feel enriching to me as defined by me? um, and enrichment now means a lot of different things, and I'm open to it shifting and changing. But there's certain core values that I've identified that resonate with me that I work towards that exist both in terms of the work that I do, but also in terms of the life I'm trying to lead.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, that has been incredibly helpful in like getting me into this new phase of life where I've started off, a new journey into being a solopreneur essentially. And now I probably work just as hard, if not harder, than I used to before. And I'm not experiencing burnout. And I think a big, big
Yeah.
part of that is really because I have a clear reason and internal motivation for why I'm doing the things that I'm doing now. And I get such a sense of joy from the ability to direct my energies.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and I don't have to wait for somebody else to direct and tell me what I should be doing and what should be important. Like I get to define that for myself now.
Yeah.
And I have to say, yeah, that's been a benefit of the experience, as
Yeah.
challenging and hard as it was for so many years.
Yeah.
Um, Yeah, like that. This has been the outcome, really. What felt like a massive failure. I used to call them the lost years, right? Essentially, 2020 to 2023 were the lost years because my life just went on pause for those three
Right.
years. And it's really only in 2024 that I actually started to feel like, oh, I think I'm actually done with like the main symptoms of burnout have started to fade. And
Yeah.
even then, I'm still always alert to the fact that our systems, our bodies, our minds are not impervious, right? Like they need rest,
Yeah.
they need support, they need help, they need refilling and nourishment. And yeah, that's really now my new orientation in life, that has come
Wow.
out of that experience.
Wow, I absolutely love that. Thank you so much for sharing everything. There's so much value in every single word that you just said. So many of those points hit home for me as well and really resonated with me. And I just want to say those years that you feel like your life was on pause, it in a way was actually an active pause because you discovered so much about yourself. You learned so much about yourself, and now you're really going to be creating this phenomenal life that matches with you. And I like what you said about it's not a working hard is not bad, right? Working
Yeah.
hard can be extremely fulfilling. And now you're working hard in line with your meaning and purpose. And therefore it
Yeah.
doesn't burn out, because you're actually doing something for you and you know why you're doing it. And by the way, for anyone listening, that doesn't mean you leave employment and you do your own thing. Not at all. I know some phenomenal lawyers, for example, and their passion and purpose is to do the law. And because that
Hmm.
aligns with them, they don't get burnout because that is their passion. They're putting in the work, but they also have balanced lives, right? They have that creativity, they have that joy as well in other aspects. And I think one thing, but correct me if I'm wrong, that someone listening could really take away from our conversation today is it is so important to sit down, give yourself some space to do that self-reflection so that you
Hmm.
understand what it is that you want, what it is that you want to chase. Because I've been seeing this message recently around a lot is really start chasing what you want and not what the world wants for you, right? So sit down and kind of
Absolutely.
examine your life and be, am I doing what the world expects of me? Or am I doing what I actually want to do? And those can be difficult questions, but if you want to live that happy,
Yeah.
fulfilling life, it's probably a really important thing to come and do that. And the other
So
thing
true.
about that journey of that up and down that you're talking about is there are ups and downs. But the difference now is that your down is not a crazy down because you've one, elevated, you've grown, and two, you've now got all these things in place in your mindset, in your toolbox that help you know what to look out for, what to be aware of, so that you don't get to that place of extreme burnout or extreme anxiety. And that's what I love about this journey is that it's not linear, it's up and down, but inevitably we're kind of just always climbing up. So you'll never be the same
Yeah.
person and you won't have that experience again. And people, you guys, you can do this in any way. You can get the coach, you can get the therapist, or you can also do this for yourself, right? Sometimes people, like I know my husband in particular, he loves being able to do this for himself, by himself. He'll watch the thing, he'll give himself time and practice to actually implement, and then it works. So you got to find the thing that works best
That
for you.
works.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah, just to kind of round us off, Rehema, your story is incredibly powerful. And it's a great reminder that burnout is not just about exhaustion, it's about identity. It's the stories that we tell ourselves about what makes us valuable or what makes us worthy. And yeah, I just love your shift from tying worth to work to actually now finding clarity in your values and the small sort of intentional steps that you take. You had mentioned at some point before when we were talking earlier about tiny experiments, and I feel like that's going to need to be another conversation that we have because it's a really fascinating thing that I recently learned about as well. So maybe
Yeah.
keep an eye out for that. Maybe we'll do that. So I just really think this was something so many people needed to hear right now. So as we close, I'd love to ask you the question that I ask all my guests. And that question is, if healing had a voice, what would it say to you right now?
Hmm, that's a good question. I think for me that there's sort of two things that immediately popped into mind, which are the two things that I've struggled with the most, but have also given me the most sense of hope, which is basically, I think my healing voice would first say to me, you are worthy of joy. You are worthy of experiencing happiness. And I think the next thing from there is, you know, this is from someone who's like a chronic overthinker, overplanner. Clarity for you is only going to come from taking action. The road unfolds as you walk on it, right? I think I got into a place where I was so scared, both in terms of what my brain was doing, but also in terms of what my body was doing, that I was afraid to take any action in case it was the wrong action that would make me feel worse. And what I've sort of learned and what my healing journey has sort of shown me is that ultimately you're never going to feel 100% ready. So that idea of everything can be a tiny experiment and you don't have to worry so much about the outcome. It's more that you took the chance, you took the step forward. That is what counts. So yeah, I think those are the things that I'm trying to kind of live my life by now. Is just to take the step, never allowing myself to get trapped in one place for too long, especially if it's a negative place, of course, to get trapped in that mindset or in that feeling of being unwell for too long. The only way that I was able to get past the multitude of health issues that I was experiencing and the burnout all at the same time was by, as tired as I was, as scared as I was, as exhausted as I was, as unhealthy as I felt, was every day taking one small step forward. And ultimately, those tiny little steps all lead into something that can be hard to try and, envision at the get-go. But after a while, those steps feel easier to take. Then you start to look back and you're like, oh, wow, there's actually quite some distance now between where I was and where I am now, you know?
Yeah.
But you don't get there until you start taking those small steps.
The steps. Wow, beautiful. Thank you. Thank you so much for this. So if this conversation resonated with you, helped you, or made you feel seen, please make sure to hit subscribe so that you never miss an episode. And come and join our free Facebook community, Eat Better, Think Better. It's where these conversations continue, and it's where you'll find real people walking the same path. If you're ready to go deeper in your own journey, whether it's healing your relationship with food, shifting your mindset, or breaking free from beliefs that are holding you back, you will find more support, resources, and ways to work with me at www.eatbetterthinkbetter.com. So until next time, here's to eating better, thinking better, and living a phenomenal life. Let's go.